Cyberpunk Edgerunners is one of the coolest animes to come out in recent years, and today I'm going to be making custom Magic the Gathering cards based on some of the show's most iconic characters. But before I begin, I'd like to give a quick spoiler warning. Please watch the show before this video. First we have David, Unexpected Dropout, a 3/3 legendary artifact creature human rogue for 1 red and a white with First Strike, Haste, and Sandevistan. Pay 1 and a white and 4 life, and he phases out. For David's design, I built him mainly around the first piece of cyberware he gets in the show, being the military grade Sandevistan, which allows him to essentially enter bullet time, giving him this extreme speed boost. I thought the best way to represent this in Magic the Gathering was to use the phasing mechanic, since I thought the best way to represent this extreme speed was by making him leave the battlefield, and I think phasing fits a bit better than flickering or blinking, since he does maintain all of the items and equipment that he picks up while he's in his phased out mode essentially. I also made the activation of this cost 4 life. Since the cyberware does do physical damage to you, I wanted to show this in Magic the Gathering by having you lose life. And I also wanted to re-emphasize the speed that he gets from this with the First Strike and Haste that he also comes with. I think if you wanted to build around David, he works super cool as a kind of Voltron style deck where you're attaching a bunch of auras and equipment to him, since being able to phase out whenever you want to makes it so he's able to dodge a bunch of removal spells that he would have potentially been hit with otherwise, making up for a lot of the disadvantage that comes with playing aura and equipment cards. Then we have Lucy, Backup Netrunner, a 2/3 legendary artifact creature human rogue for 1 white, blue, and a black with whenever Lucy, Backup Netrunner, enters the battlefield or becomes tapped for the first time this turn, you may look at the top card of target player's library. You may exile that card. Lucy is a Netrunner, meaning she's essentially able to really delve deep into the physical data and code stored on computers, and she's able to dive around and look around it and find whatever she needs from it. Notably, in the series, she uses this ability to corrupt data specifically. So in Magic, I wanted to represent this by allowing you to essentially manipulate people's draws, letting you see the top card of your library, similar to cards like Mishra's Bauble, representing the idea that she's looking through information. But in order to represent the idea that you can manipulate data, I made it so you can exile the top card of the library to get completely rid of it. But to make it so you can't essentially lock your opponents out of the game, I limited it so the only time it happens is the first time that she enters the battlefield or becomes tapped in the turn. So that way it's hard to, make a miserable game state where you're just exiling your opponent's entire library. That being said, I do think she works best in a kind of control style deck where you're trying to control your opponent's draws. So if they're strapped for mana or they're trying to dig for a removal spell, being able to exile cards or keep cards on the top of their library is super convenient, and it works great for you if you're trying to dig for something specifically. Next we have Maine, Head of the Crew, a 5/5 legendary artifact human rogue for 2 red, white, and black with Mentor, and Maine, Head of the Crew, attacks each turn if able to, and equipment you control have pay 4 life. Attach this equipment to Maine, Head of the Crew. And equipment attached to Maine cannot be unattached. Maine is an incredibly important character throughout the story of Edgerunners, but the most important thing that happens with this character is how heavily he embraces cyberware and how he eventually falls into cyberpsychosis from it. In Magic the Gathering, I wanted to show this by forcing Maine to act every turn, with the idea being that him attacking every turn is the craze state that he enters from going into cyberpsychosis. Then I thought a great way to represent cyberware in Magic the Gathering would be with equipment. And going off the idea that the cyberware is equipment, I made it so he has the static ability of giving all your equipment attached to him for only 4 life. The idea being that the more cyberware you add to yourself, the more it does take a toll on your body. But I also wanted to give him the restriction of not being able to unequip them, since during Edgerunners he makes it very clear that he's unwilling to give up his cyberware even though he knows that it's starting to affect his health and that he's starting to undergo cyberpsychosis. Finally, I also wanted to give him Mentor, since she does act as a great guiding force for David, especially when he first welcomes to the crew, when he trains him, and just generally being an overall pretty useful father figure for David as he starts to grow into himself. If you wanted to build around Maine, I think the main thing you have to build around is that attack each combat clause. So you're going to want to run equipment that give him some sort of evasion or protection so that attacking each turn is not too much of a downside. So something like Mask of Gristlebrand will give him flying and also lifelink as an added bonus. Something like Shadow Sphere will give him trample to make sure he's still getting his damage through. Or Dark Steel Plate will just give him full-blown indestructible, making it less risky for you to attack into things. Next we have Dorio, Maine's Faithful, a 6/6 legendary artifact creature human rogue for 2 green, white, and a blue with vigilance, trample, and you can pay 1 green and tap her to have her fight target creature you don't control, or you can pay 1 white and tap her to unattach an equipment from a creature you control, and if you do that, you draw a card. Dorio is one of the strongest members of the crew, as we see the prowess of her when she teaches David how to fight, and in Magic the Gathering I wanted to show this by giving her the ability to fight any target creature an opponent controls. One of the major portions of Dorio's character is being Maine's partner. She tries to talk Maine into removing his cyberware in order to prevent him from going into cyberpsychosis. Unfortunately, he doesn't listen to her, and to reference this, I wanted to give her the second ability, which allows you to remove equipment from a creature you control. In exchange, you would be able to draw a card. The idea being that you benefit, i.e. drawing a card, off of removing the cyberware from somebody, i.e. removing equipment. And from a flavor standpoint, I also wanted to make sure this wording didn't actually work with Maine, since you can't remove equipment from him. If you wanted to actually use Dorio as a card, she works super great, specifically with Togo Goblin Weaponsmith, because he makes a ton of very cheap equipment. So you're able to have a lot of targets for unattaching equipment from creatures, and the equip cost for rocks is extremely low. I think she also works great with equipment that enter the battlefield with a body on them, so specifically the 4 Mirrodin cards like Glimmer Lens, Hexgulf Hammer, and Bladehold Warwhip work pretty decently with her. Then we have Rebecca, Deadly Loudmouth, a 4/3 legendary artifact creature human rogue for 3 red, with whenever Rebecca, Deadly Loudmouth attacks, you may exile the top card of your library. If you do, she gets +X/+O until end of turn, where X is the mana value of the exiled card. Out of all the characters in Edgerunners, Rebecca is probably the closest character we have to a comic relief, being that she loves guns, explosions, and just general chaos, and you see this all throughout the show. To represent this chaotic and aggressive nature, I thought the best way to represent this in Magic would be to incorporate some of the randomness that we see in the way she acts in the show into her card. And I landed on randomly increasing her power, since it can be somewhat random what type of gun she uses in a fight, ranging from anywhere to a normal pistol to a gun that's almost as large as she is. In Magic, I made this the top of your library, since in Magic, cards are your weapons, so it's close enough to a gun, I suppose. If you wanted to actually build around her, I think she works really great with top deck manipulation, so stuff like Crystal Ball, Brainstorm, or Sensei's Divining Top. Then finally, we have Kiwi, Turncoat, a legendary artifact human rogue, 3/4 for 4, blue and a black, with when Kiwi Turncoat enters the battlefield, when you cast it, look at target opponent's hand. You may choose up to 1 artifact card from it. That player discards that card, then gain control of up to 1 creature target opponent controls. Just like Lucy, Kiwi is a netrunner, but I wanted to differ how I showed her abilities, so for Kiwi, I decided to go in a different direction. Rather than disrupting information the way Lucy does from the top of the library, I made it so you can disrupt the hand directly with a kind of duress style effect, but only for artifacts, since I think that makes the most sense considering they hack into technology, and artifacts are definitely the closest thing we have in Magic to that. One other important part of Kiwi in the story is towards the end of the series, where she betrays the crew by helping Faraday kidnap Lucy. So in Magic, I wanted to show this by making it so when you cast her, you gain control of a creature an opponent controls, making her a really great tempo piece in any kind of matchup. So if you're lucky enough, she can be essentially a 3-for-1, but I also wanted to make it so it's on a cast trigger rather than an enter the battlefield trigger for her, so we don't end up getting another Agent of Treachery. That being said though, she's still incredibly strong, being able to get you a decent body and another creature an opponent controls. If you enjoy this video, you should check out this one right over here, where I made custom Magic the Gathering cards based on Scott Pilgrim.